Iran is charging ships up to $2 million to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Some are paying in Chinese yuan and some in cryptocurrency. America says this is illegal. Iran says it has every right. Who is correct? Is there any precedent for this? And what does international law actually say? Let's find out, because the answer is more complicated than either side wants you to believe. The geography, why this matters. First, the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is the only sea exit from the Persian Gulf. All oil and gas from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, and Iraq must pass through this single corridor. At its narrowest point, the strait is just 21 nautical miles wide. On the northern coast sits Iran. On the southern coast sits Oman. 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through here daily. There is no alternative sea route. If Hormuz is disrupted, the world feels it immediately, and right now Iran is laying its claim to control it. The legal framework. UNCLOS, the international law that governs navigation through the world's oceans, is called UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Think of it as the Constitution of the Oceans. UNCLOS says three things that are directly relevant here. First, every coastal nation owns 12 nautical miles of territorial sea from its coastline. This is its sovereign territory. Second, international straits used for global navigation are subject to something called transit passage, meaning ships have an automatic right to pass through continuously and without being stopped, taxed, or harassed. Article 44 of UNCLOS is explicit. Coastal states shall not hamper transit passage. Article 26 specifically prohibits charging fees simply for passing through. Third, and here is where it gets interesting. While almost the entire world is a signatory to UNCLOS, neither Iran nor the United States has ratified UNCLOS. Iran signed it in 1982, but never completed ratification. The US has never ratified it either, though Washington treats most of its navigational provisions as binding customary international law whenever it suits them. So we have the world's most important waterway, governed by a treaty that neither the country controlling it nor the country opposing it has actually signed. Iran's legal argument. Now here is Iran's actual legal argument, and it is not as weak as Washington makes it sound. Iran expanded its territorial sea to 12 nautical miles in 1959, as it is considered in international law. Oman did the same in 1972. By 1972, the combined 12 nautical miles of Iran plus 12 nautical miles of Oman equals 24 nautical miles, greater than the 21 nautical mile width of the strait at its narrowest point. Technically, there is no strip of international water in the middle. Every ship transiting Hormuz enters the territorial claim of either Iran, Oman, or both. Iran also maintains its own 1993 domestic maritime law, which requires prior authorization for all vessels entering Iranian waters, a position it has maintained consistently for 33 years. And crucially, Iran and Oman have a bilateral agreement. In July 1974, Iran and Oman signed an agreement delimiting their continental shelf boundary in the Strait of Hormuz, which entered into effect in January 1975. This agreement allows both countries to patrol each other's respective territorial seas for the maintenance of security in the Strait. Iran is now finalizing a joint protocol with Oman to co-administer tanker traffic through the strait, requiring every vessel to obtain advance permits from both countries. Iran's argument in simple terms: this is our waters, and not international water as per the agreed international law. We have a bilateral agreement with Oman. We have our own domestic maritime law. And since neither we nor the US has ratified UNCLOS, you cannot use UNCLOS to override our sovereign rights. Is it legally airtight? No. But is it entirely without basis? Also no. The comparisons. Other natural straits. Let's now compare 4 other natural waterways around the world and see how navigation and tolls work there. Turkey, Bosphorus, and Dardanelles. Tolls charged. This is Iran's strongest precedent. The Bosphorus and Dardanelles are natural straits connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and entirely within Turkish territory, as per the same logic of 12 nautical miles. They are governed by the 1936 Montreux Convention, a multilaterally agreed treaty giving Turkey sovereign management rights. Turkey charges commercial ships transit fees under the Montreux Convention, a fee for lighthouse, rescue and security, and medical fees. In October 2022, Turkey also raised these fees fivefold from 83 cents to $4 a weight per ton of net registered tonnage, increasing annual revenue to hundreds of millions of dollars. The key difference from Hormuz: Turkey's right to charge is enshrined in a multilateral treaty accepted by the international community. Iran has no such treaty. But the principle, a coastal state managing and charging for use of a natural strait it controls, exists. Turkey is the precedent Iran keeps pointing to. Strait of Malacca. No tolls. But now being questioned. The Strait of Malacca is only 2 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, far narrower than Hormuz. 22% of the world's maritime trade passes through it, including 80% of China's oil imports. Over 100,000 ships transited it in 2025. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore jointly manage it. No tolls have ever been charged. UNCLOS prohibits it, and all three countries are UNCLOS signatories. But here is the breaking news. Triggered directly by Iran's actions at Hormuz, Indonesia's finance minister this week suggested imposing tolls on Malacca, saying, if we split it three ways, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, it could be quite substantial. Singapore's foreign minister immediately pushed back, saying Singapore will not participate in any attempt to impose tolls, but the Pandora's box is open. Iran's actions at Hormuz have now made Malacca a live political debate, Danish straits connecting the North Sea to the Baltic Sea. Denmark manages the Øresund, Great Belt, and Little Belt Straits. For centuries, Denmark charged what's called the Sound Toll, one of the most lucrative tolls in history. But in 1857, an international treaty abolished the Sound Toll permanently in exchange for a one-time payment to Denmark. Today there are no tolls, and there's a free passage under UNCLOS Strait of Gibraltar, connecting the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. Jointly bordered by Spain, Morocco, and British Gibraltar, 14 nautical miles wide at its narrowest. It is governed by UNCLOS, and there are no tolls. Free passage for all ships. No coastal state has ever attempted to charge for transit in this case. Man-made canals, where tolls are legal. Now, the contrast, two man-made canals where tolls are completely legal and universally accepted. Suez Canal, Egypt. Built by Egypt, managed by the Suez Canal Authority. Average toll per ship, $296,000. Around 19,000 ships transit annually, generating billions for Egypt. 100% legal. Why? Because Egypt built it. It is entirely within Egyptian territory. It is constructed infrastructure, not a natural waterway. Panama Canal, Panama. Built originally by the United States and transferred to Panama in 1999. Average toll per ship, $262,000. Around 14,000 ships annually. 100% legal. Same reason, it is built infrastructure within a single nation's sovereign territory. The critical legal distinction, you can charge for a canal you built. You cannot charge for a natural strait that already existed before nations did, according to UNCLOS. This is the line Iran is crossing that makes the international legal community uncomfortable. So, is Iran's toll demand genuine, legal, or precedented? Genuine. Absolutely yes. Iran has suffered 50 years of sanctions, lost billions in the current war, and has a legitimate argument that it controls the waters through which ships pass. The financial motivation is entirely real, precedented, partially. Turkey's Bosphorus tolls under the Montreux Convention show that a coastal state can charge for transit through a natural strait, but only with a multilaterally agreed treaty behind it. Iran has no such treaty. Legal under international law, this is where it gets genuinely gray. UNCLOS prohibits it clearly, but neither Iran nor the US has ratified UNCLOS. The International Court of Justice has never ruled specifically on Hormuz. The 1974 Iran-Oman agreement gives Iran some bilateral basis for co-management. Iran's domestic maritime law has required prior authorization for 33 years. And before we reach our conclusion, here is one more dimension most analysts are missing entirely. Global warming is melting Arctic ice at twice the global average rate, and opening a completely new shipping route that did not exist before. The Northern Sea Route along Russia's Arctic coast is already being used commercially. It is approximately 40% shorter than the traditional route through the Suez Canal for ships traveling between Europe and East Asia. A transpolar sea route directly over the North Pole is projected to be commercially viable by 2040 to 2045. And here's the problem. The same sovereignty questions that haunt Hormuz already haunt the Arctic. Russia claims the Northern Sea Route falls within its territorial waters and currently requires shipping companies to pay steep fees for icebreaker escort vessels to accompany their fleets. Canada maintains that the Northwest Passage, the route through Canada's Arctic archipelago, falls under Canadian sovereignty. The United States contests both of them, arguing that it is an international strait under UNCLOS, the same UNCLOS that the US has not ratified. So here is the bigger picture this video is really pointing to. The idea that global shipping routes are free and open is more of an aspiration than a reality. Turkey charges you to pass through the Bosphorus. Russia charges you to use its Arctic route. Iran is charging you at Hormuz. And Canada, Indonesia, and others are watching carefully, wondering whether their geographic position is an under-monetized asset. The Hormuz toll is not an isolated act of defiance. It is a symptom of a deeper global trend. Nations are reassessing the value of the geography they sit on, and asking why they should provide a free service to the world's shipping industry when others are not. The honest answer is, Iran's position is legally contestable, but not entirely without foundation. And in a world where power increasingly shapes law, rather than law shaping power, Iran's physical control of the strait may matter more than any legal argument. What is certain is this: Iran's actions have already opened a Pandora's box. Indonesia floated Malacca tolls this week. The principle of free navigation through natural straits, the foundation of $10 trillion of annual global trade, is now being questioned in multiple oceans simultaneously. That is the real consequence of the Hormuz toll. Not the $2 million per ship, but the idea that natural choke points can be monetized, an idea that, once released, is very difficult to put back in the bottle. I am not an expert. Subscribe and hit the bell and let me know in the comments. Do you think Iran has the right to charge tolls? Or is this a violation of international law that sets a dangerous precedent? I will be releasing a video every week on geopolitics, finance, and global events. Share in comments on what you need the next video to be. See you next week.